finally.
Good.
All right, so let's start things off. I wanted to just quickly introduce myself, and then we'll move into the introduction of the panelists and then into the questions. I'm Nivi, the founder of IKKIVI. IKKIVI is a curated marketplace of sustainable and ethical fashion designers from India. We recently started IKKIVI on an online magazine called IKKIVI Zine, where we talk a lot about the sustainable lifestyle, being more conscious and mindful in terms of our daily life. With that, we started these conversations, which was actually meant to be offline, but it so happened that we're stuck online, which ends up being a good thing because we have these lovely panelists from different parts of the world, and we can reach a lot more people. So it's all in good spirit, I guess. So I wanted to just quickly introduce you, and then if you can tell us more about what you do and who you are, that'll be great. So we have Dominique Drakeford. She is a powerful voice for sustainable fashion and is based in New York. There's Devina Singh from Fairtrade, and she's based in India. And we have Noemi Plaza, who's the founder of the Keisei magazine, and she's based in London. So can we start with a brief introduction? All right, so Dominique, shall we start with you?
Sure. Loving this global panel, literally. But hey guys, I'm Dominique Drakeford. I am the chief curator of a digital platform called Melanin As. The As stands for And Sustainable Style. And I'm also and Melanin As is a digital space that elevates and celebrates people of color across fashion, beauty, wellness, and land sovereignty. And I'm the co-founder of an initiative called Sustainable Brooklyn, which bridges the gap between the mainstream sustainable forces and targeted communities. And we do that through various events and resources and access to information through various portals. And ultimately, I guess I'm a micro influencer, a social sustainability writer, a creative director. I just wear a lot of different hats working to disrupt mainstream discourse and amplify the necessity of having people of color at the forefront of sustainable conversation across multiple industries.
Thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time and joining us this early in the morning. Devina?
Hi, Nivi. I am Devina. I'm a campaigner for Fairtrade and Fashion Revolution. I do communications basically, but I'd like to believe that I'm a part of just revolutions and movements to make this world transparent, fairer, and safer for the people and the stakeholders in the global fashion industry, in the food industry. And my whole job revolves around building a consumer movement and getting people to think about the implications that their choices have on other people and how we can impact lives. So I'm actually very happy to be a part of this dialogue because there's so much that I've been feeling. So this is a great way for me to talk about how I'm thinking, and I've told all my friends that this is a space for my 2 a.m. thoughts because we're talking about mindful consciousness. So I think while what I do is a very big part of who I am, this conversation is the real me.
Thank you. So happy to have you with us. Noemi, hi.
Hello everyone. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, Nivi, for inviting me. So my name is Noemi Plaza, and I am the founder of Keisei magazine. In a few words, Keisei magazine is a digital destination for sustainable lifestyle. Our features cover from fashion and beauty to lifestyle, well-being, and culture. And we are aiming to influence and guide our readers to make those small changes that will have a big impact on the planet and others. So yes, and we are also trying to be a voice for ethical and sustainable and independent brands. Thank you.
Thank you. Lovely. So we have everybody who is, in the fashion space and in the sustainable and conscious space with us today. So what I wanted to start off with is first address isolation, this forced isolation that we're all in. I would like to know what this has meant for you personally, and what is your situation like in your part of the world, because it is very very different in different countries in terms of what the situation is, how our government is dealing with things, how are people feeling. So I'd like to hear a little bit about that, and if we can share what is going on in your part of the world, that would be great. Anybody can start. Okay, Dominique, let's start with you.
So part one was isolation, or what's going on I'm in New York, and I dive in and out of sort of being in good spirits versus being in torn spirits, to be honest. As most people know who have been watching the news, New York is a complete mess. And it makes sense that it's a mess just because it's super congested. New Yorkers are arrogant and they don't listen. And there's limited resources and supplies, which exponent the number of cases that are happening. And then on top of that, understanding that Black and Brown, low income, poor communities throughout the Midwest, throughout the East Coast, throughout down South, are disproportionately being affected due to social political systems and structures. And so I'm often thinking about systems theory while I'm in isolation. My personal situation, I'm very blessed. I live with my fiance and I have a roommate. I have a huge backyard by New York standards. I'm growing food in my living room that I'm eager to transplant to my backyard. And as a freelancer, working from home has somewhat of a comfort to me because although I can't go out and network, working from home is pretty normal for me. And talking to friends who are in corporate spaces or in other spaces, it's a lot more of a challenge. But I think the isolation is having me think about systems as well as individual responsibility. And I'm constantly thinking about, I don't want to say the opportunity that comes from hopefully systems being broken, but a lot of shadow work in terms of what's happening in our capitalistic democracy is surfacing and hitting me in a way that I'm eager to contribute to behavioral changes, and I'm eager to think about how we can get back to land and agriculture. I know I'm going all the way off in the deep end, but my isolation has my brain thinking about how to set up future systems for liberation, and I think I'm blessed to be in that opportunity to do that because I'm not an essential worker. And because I have just plenty of access here in my Brooklyn home that other people don't have. So I have a responsibility to think about the future of people and planetary health in a different way.
That's amazing. I had one follow-up question to that, specifically with you being in New York. How have you been able to kind of separate physically, mentally, emotionally, separate yourself from all that's going on in New York? Firstly, New York is an extremely fast-paced, vibrant city to begin with. And now there's so much going on in such a small space. How have you been able to kind of differentiate yourself and kind of work positively in such a external environment?
Well, I would say the beauty of how I've been operating even before COVID-19 is that I realized that I've always been a part of a system, and just being a Black woman in America, there's always been this juxtaposition of survival and resilience and regenerative thought even before the pandemic happened. And so, in a way, I've already been conditioned to be able to make sure that I'm being grounded every morning, doing my rituals. Like, a lot of how I've governed myself before the pandemic and now hasn't changed. Just because, again, like, I deal with a lot of shit, and people in my community deal with a lot of shit prior to the pandemic, but grounding myself every single morning has been important. I limit the amount of news that I take in. I intentionally reach out to community to do check-ins, and I've just created a community flow in which I can connect with others, but also have time to heal, to do breath work, and to recalibrate what needs to be done on my end. I will say that I wake up at like around 6, 7 every morning, which has its pros and cons, but my brain automatically is in problem solving mode. And I personally know that I need to take a break, but I think I do a pretty healthy job of infusing break time, breath work. But I don't know, I'm just in community activism mode at this point. And also because I'm writing a book, I'm like, these are what's happening around me is so applicable to what I'm writing. And it's just part of a streamlined ideology of manifestation. So I will say, to answer your question, I'm very intentional about balancing. Like, I need to breathe. I need to do my meditation, do my yoga. Even if I need to dance and sing at the top of my lungs, that's my personal healing work. And then it's also healing for me to tap into community and tap into writing and tap into next steps. Whereas I know a lot of people, they're like, yeah, I want no parts of it. I just want to be by myself. But for me, that part of that is, it's very healing and therapeutic for me, quite honestly.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something we'll definitely get into a little bit more as we go along, in terms of balance and how to create a space for yourself, even though there's so much going on in the external world. But we'll get to that. Let's hear from Devina.
Hi, Nivi. I think that this is a very broad question, and I'm going to try my best to answer it, and you stop me when you need to. But this, from the CA protest to coronavirus to everything that is happening, I think it's just taken so much of a toll on me personally from December. There's just so much happening in my life that I don't have control over. And it was taking a toll on my mental health. And then as a campaigner, I took a decision to do what I can do best and keep doing what I need to do to be able to function and process and just act, to just be real to the circumstances and understand that I'm somewhere. So I'm stuck in Goa. I came here for a holiday because my friend won an Emmy, and when your friend wins an Emmy, you have to come out and support them. So I came down here to celebrate with her, and she made her way back to New York. And Quinn, if you're listening, I'm still stuck in Goa, and I thank you for it because things are much safer here. But in the first few weeks, it was so difficult to get food or access to supplies, and it just really made me to start thinking about local sustainability and how difficult it is just for some economies to survive on their own. And when borders close, how does it immediately affect people? I'm in India, and it is, if it were to hit India, the healthcare facilities of this country cannot even support the pandemic. And I think that that's something that concerns me every day. And I think what has been the most difficult to deal with is that to know that before Corona gets to India, the hunger and poverty virus will get to India, and that's going to affect a lot more people than the virus. And while I really want to do something about it, there's such little that I can do. And then Fashion Revolution happened, and all of last week I was campaigning for Fashion Revolution, so I got some time to do what I really truly care about, and that made things really easy for me. It just made me find my drive again, be passionate about something, wake up in the morning with a to-do list and try catching up to a calendar. So I felt productive because I feel like there has been, it's okay if you're not as productive in these times because you're surviving a pandemic and working alongside. So I really feel like we need to think about work from home cultures and check in on mental health of our employees, our friends, because everybody has their own level of crisis in times of the pandemic. But for me, there are many things bothering me, but the most important of them all is that we need to physically distance, but this is the time when we start living like a social community. So my whole idea of isolation is very different. I believe that you can drop down your mask to smile at a kid on the road because masks can be scary, and I don't want to live in this whole apocalyptic feeling world, and just stay real. Like, we have to survive this, but just because you say how are you to someone, you're not going to catch the virus. So just be a little more kind to one another. And this is coming from me, and I was the girl who used to give free hugs outside Jyoti Nivas College on a Sunday because I wanted to feel better about my life. So I know that my idea of social involvement is going to be different from someone else. So I don't want to direct people on how they should do it. But I think everybody needs to think about how you react to a stranger on the road, and just smile. Wear a poster on your t-shirt that says we'll survive this, or just spread as much love as you can in these times is the one thing that I'd like to drive in times like this.
I think that's a great thing to do, actually. Wear posters that has like something nice to say so that at least you bring a smile to somebody else's faces, because it's so difficult and I don't even know what everybody is feeling, thinking. Like, we are in our closed space and there is only so much you can do through Zoom and through social media. There is that physical connection is just not there. Like, even when we're having this discussion, like, I'm not fully into it, like when you're having a person to person conversation, there's so much more passion and feeling in these conversations that now I mean, it's nice to still see people and talk about these things, but it's still so hard to get into.
I was trying to explain that to a friend the other day, because I posted about just the importance of energy exchange in real time, and like just how I'm a very connected person and how I'm having a hard time just connecting digitally. And people are like, "Oh, you're such a grandma." And I'm like, no, because even when I'm thinking about agriculture and people touching the land and just, I don't know, I completely understand. I'm having a hard time like elevating to this whole new digital world that's only going to get more digital, I feel like, with the pandemic.
For sure. Like, and if we meet somebody else, like, I'm already catching myself feeling ill-equipped in a conversation because I'm not used to having these physical conversations as frequently and as often, and I am a heavy people person, and it's something that comes naturally to me, but I catch myself like stuck with words and I'm like, what is going on? It's crazy.
This is the first time I'm doing a conversation like this with you, and I can't give you that hug before and after.
Yeah.
We're talking about, and we've done many of these sitting and talking about newer world conversations. What I'm really happy about also is that my friends Melita and Victor from France and Lisbon are on this call today. So while there's always a plus, and you know what I mean?
For sure. Noemi, let's hear from you.
So I really resonate with everything you've been saying, and so I am in Europe, as you know. I'm in London. I'm Spanish, so I have most of my family in Spain. Well, not all my family in Spain, and most of my friends. So my personal situation with the COVID has been in stages, I think. So I think at the beginning, at the very, very beginning, we were not really believing that this was coming. And then it suddenly hit very, very strong I think Europe was hit very, very hard, especially starting on Italy, and then very quickly going to Spain. And then during that 2 weeks, in London, actually in the UK, the measures have been taking longer. So the lockdown, I think, actually officially started only 2 or 3 weeks ago, while in Spain it's been more than 1 month now, and Italy as well. But as soon as the lockdown was officially in Spain, me and my fiance, we decided to stay in as well. He can do his work from home, and we felt super lucky that we could keep doing our work from home, and we decided to just stay in. And in the beginning, it was hard because obviously I was anxious and I was worried about my family and about my friends, because the things in Spain were very, very ugly. But then after 1 week, I was also like sleeping in the morning, and there's this kind of like a cloud on top of my head for 1 week, and then I realized that was not helping me. That was not helping anyone around me either. So I stopped reading that much the news, and I started getting my routine, waking up in the morning, dressing like if I'm going to the office or if I'm going to a meeting, and putting my schedule and focusing as well on being grateful. And I started appreciating a lot the time I was spending with my fiance. We are having breakfast, lunch, and dinner together now. I'm super lucky that everyone in my circle is healthy and safe for now, and that makes obviously help. And but now, like after all of these weeks, I'm starting to develop a bit of more worry about, as you were saying as well, some of you, about the future developments after this. I think it's starting to worry me about the poverty in the world. Like obviously, like the vulnerable people are going to be the ones that are going to suffer more in the long term, and I'm trying to focus on how I can help to that. So I'm looking a lot on my well-being. I'm meditating, I'm exercising, I'm trying to stay positive and grateful, so I can be also have a clear mind to know how I can actually help to make to help these vulnerable people who probably will suffer the most in the long term. So I'm trying to keep my head clear to see the good things we can actually all together do, and how can I bring my part on it.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something we're all trying to cope with and balance in general with, in terms of work and having work in our home environment, which is normally a more relaxed space, and then there's suddenly you have to ensure that you have like this space that you dedicate to just productive work, and then there's this other space where you do your more home related relaxing activities. How is it, anybody can start answering this, but how have you been able to kind of balance your routine so that you get a bit of everything into your day, and not kind of overwhelm yourself in this kind of a situation in terms of balance, like we were just talking of earlier, Dominique?
So I can start.
Oh,
sorry. I think someone else was.
No, go ahead, Noemi.
So I think the way I'm trying to balance is by every Sunday and Monday I'm working on my to-do list for the week, and I'm planning very well my calls as well. So I'm trying to have calls with my contributors Mondays and Tuesdays and focus like on the plan for the week in terms of the business, and then Wednesdays I'm leaving for like networking and having calls with people who we can collaborate in the future. And I've never been this kind of organized in my life, but I'm trying to be super organized. Like I wake up at this time, I get a shower, and then at this time I have a meditation, and then I exercise, and then I'm super strict as well with the time we are having lunch and the time we are having dinner, because my fiance could stay working till 12 in the night if I don't stop him. So I'm just trying to take control over that, and help myself and help him as well to have lunch at the same time every day and have dinner, and make sure that by 6:30, 7 p.m. I'm not looking at emails anymore, and I'm not working. And that's actually helping me a lot to be more productive and to feel better.
Thank you.
A little bit of what Devina said earlier. I think because I got asked this question in an interview not too long ago, and it made me think how mindful that I need to be, that everybody is literally dealing with they're in their own microcosm with regards to how the pandemic is affecting them and their family. Like, I have friends who just had a newborn baby, and so their flow is going to be very different than me as a social activist who always works from home. And that's going to be very different from somebody who's taking care of an elderly, or that's different from somebody who's an essential worker who has to take the subway every day. So before I even answer this question, I'm always mindful that there is no blanket approach to a healthy, healing, productive lifestyle, first and foremost. But for me, it's been a little bit of organized chaos. I know that there's things that I want to accomplish every day, and I kind of let the energy of the day and sort of how my spirit operates dictate the flow of or the order in which I accomplish it, if that makes sense. Like, I know every morning I want to drink something that's immunity boosting, so I make some sort of herbal tonic. Not the same tonic every day, not the same time, but I know that I want to start my day with a tonic and some sort of grounding meditation. And that could be journaling. It could literally be meditation. It could be stretching. It could be watering my plants. So it's less about having a particular schedule and more about knowing that I want to accomplish this thing or this feeling, and I can go a lot of different ways about accomplishing it, if that makes sense. I'm a big proponent in not living the same day twice. So I always make sure that there's a shift. And because my fiance is a super creative brain person, I get up at 7 or 6 in the morning. That's around the time he goes to bed. He's a night owl. I'm a morning person. So he's been extra night owl, and I've been extra morning person. So even balancing that and making sure that we spend some time together while also letting him do his creative and healing, things throughout the day has been important. But yeah, at the end of the day, do what feels good to you and not what sort of social media has programmed people to think is a healthy workflow from home.
And I think that's something that I'm still figuring out slowly.
Yeah.
It's something I'm aware of and conscious about. But at the same time, it's so hard to kind of pull away from what you see online and what you see people doing. For me, example, it's been about 5 weeks, I think now, that we've been in lockdown. And now I'm initially I started off with a proper routine. It was a bit difficult to get into, but it started off well. 3 weeks in, 4 weeks in, it was fine. It was exciting, actually, because I was spending a lot more time with myself and just myself, and doing the things that I wanted to do and discovering things about myself that I didn't know all of these past 30 years, which is exciting. But now I think I am reaching that point where I'm still putting That's fine. I'm putting so much pressure on myself to perform and to be productive, because the lockdown is kind of going to slowly be relaxed next week. And there is that tension of it getting relaxed and people going back into this busy life. And I have so many things on my to-do list that I would still like to spend this quality time on. But I'm anxious about the fact that things are going to kind of go back to how it used to be, and I won't have that time. So that real balance has been extremely difficult to achieve, but it's also been exciting. Of course, this is from a very, very privileged point of view because I have my basics in place. This is just a completely different, kind of mindset altogether. But yeah, it's been challenging for sure. Devina?
Um, I think that how I started off my days earlier was waking up to a shop that my mom had set up for all the old people in the apartment complex who couldn't go out. So I'd wake up in the morning and there would be papayas and watermelon, and they would just have like a spread outside, and everybody would come to take their stuff, and I would make sure I stand on the balcony, talk to them at the shop downstairs, but just check in on how everybody is doing. Then there was some medicines being organized and all of that happening. So I think I started off when I was still coming out of my holiday, not sure when I'll go back to Bangalore, and thinking that this might get easier. It took a while for me to realize that we've been hit by a pandemic, which is now going to be putting us in a situation where schools don't open up till November, or the next music concert is going to happen in 1.5 years, and small things that you're not putting into perspective right now because things are just so tough. Things are just so real so soon. And I think when it really changed overnight for me was when my aunt, who's a doctor in the NHS, was detected positive with the coronavirus because she's an ENT surgeon, and it just got too real too soon. And I've now reached that stage where she has put in so much time in recovery. She's gone through hell and back, and now she's gone to work today. And I was talking to her this morning, and I was like, don't go for another week. And she said, there's so much pressure on the NHS that I want to be there and I want to help. And I think it's stories like that that inspire me to do what I'm doing, to see that, there's so many people who have so much conviction, and that I need to do my best. And every day I feel like I'm falling short of it by a lot. I've been talking to a lot of farmer groups and factories, with fashion being a non-essential right now. Factories are just shut, and I'm trying to use this time to think of a new world and a better world. I'm trying to think of what I can do to inspire mindful consciousness, which is why I'm really happy I'm on this panel and dialogue with other conscious people, trying to send a message out, because I really feel like we can build the dream world. At the end of this, we can use this time because people are realizing how the planet is healing, how healthcare is more important than any form of vanity or luxury in the world, how if it comes down to survival, it's about all of us collectively and globally, and how one thing in one part of the world can affect all of us. We all believe in the butterfly effect in so many ways and more, but when it comes, there's so many species that go extinct every day. But when mankind is under threat, then we wake up, and I think that now that we've all woken up, the world can, like Apurva, one of my friends, says that the world can be very polarized. There might be the YOLO crowd which comes out of this and says that I'm going to live life for today, and I think there will be a lot more conscious people who will start looking at life from another lens. And I hope we go that way and we build a better world. And I really, I've been thinking of, for the past few weeks, it's been giving me sleepless nights, but I'm thinking of, can we reach out to global brands? Because in the top 20 richest people in the world, 6 own fashion brands, and tell them to help the factories and farms with the immediate cash flow needs in countries like India, where they've been sourcing from for over 2 decades. So I'm just trying to rethink an ideal world. I know that it's not constructive, which is why I take time out to spend time with a small group of people that I have here, 5 of us, but I don't want to deal with all of this alone and be alone. We have 5 people in the same apartment on the same floor, and if someone has to go get groceries, that one person goes, and I feel like this is going to go on for a really long time. And I'm not saying people need to go out there and socialize with each other, but I think we need to form a small support group. And I feel really bad for all of those people who are stuck at home alone, those who have nobody to fall back on. So my realities are as jumbled as it sounds when I talk.
Devina, in terms of work, I did want to get into this a little bit more. You work directly a lot with, the root of the supply chain in terms of the factories and, how, and farmers and things like that. How have people in this level of the supply chain kind of dealing with this situation? How has it affected them professionally, personally? If you can just tell us a little bit more about that.
So, I was talking to Arun Ambatipuri from Chetna Organics. My first farm trip to a Fairtrade farm was with him, and he has taught me everything I know about fashion and sustainability in fabric. He's taken me to cotton farms and really shown me the lives of people and how Fairtrade impacts them. Have been I feel like you can learn more one day in a farm about fashion than in a whole year in any organization or setup. And you know, cotton has 70% of the farmer suicides in India are linked to cotton. Cotton has always had a big social and environmental cost. It's one farmer every half an hour in India committing suicide, and the largest wave of suicides in human history. These people have always been marginalized, and like I said, I feel like the hunger and poverty virus is going to get to India before that. It's been what they were telling me was that they were at 1,200 million metric tons of cotton sales in January, which hit 800, which went down to 800 just by March. And I think that with global brands canceling their orders to supply chains, there's a big problem at the farms, and especially for the fashion industry, that we're not recognizing. We are also beginning to realize that it's going to be difficult to get non-GMO seeds and breed organic seeds for the next cropping season, and which would just like Fairtrade is a totally non-GMO organization, so it affects us at that level. We're also seeing that maybe the next year farmers should be asked to diversify risk and grow more of the lentils and the other crops that are intercropped with cotton versus just growing cotton. So that's also a big problem. For the factory workers, a lockdown of 20 days, especially with the laws in the country not making factories obligated to paying more than daily wage or piece rate in times like this, there is no income for a garment factory worker. And I feel like these are really difficult times for the fashion industry, and especially for those who anyways are hidden behind the glitz and glamour of fashion. Those nameless faces all over the world are really suffering. And I'm thinking about all of those factories, maybe, and we were talking about this the other day, that we know that there are exploitative factories, and we know that there's child labor in the world. And what is happening at those factories, and we don't even know the situation in those places. And the other day I read about this girl there's a report that says that she was walking from Telangana, and another one which says that she was walking from Tirupur to Chhattisgarh, a 12-year-old migrant worker, and she died 1 hour away from home. And that gave me like many sleepless nights. I think that we have to realize that the migrant workers and the situation that we see in the cities is more apparent to us, and that's a very important problem, and I care about all of those people very deeply. But we also need to, as India and a country, or as a global economy and fashion, start thinking about the farmers and workers in the different corners and pockets of this country and mobilize global action towards it.
Yeah, I think it's important for us to talk about this, because there is so much going on for us that we tend to forget what is going on outside of our comfort zones and comfort spaces, because these kind of times, I don't think, nobody's experienced it, especially in this age group. For sure, we've not experienced anything like this, so we really don't know what is going on. What do you think is something that, how is this going to affect them in the long run? What is going to happen when we come out of this lockdown, especially for this group of people?
I think that a daily wage worker or a garment factory worker went out of rent and money for food on day 3, 4, 5. I feel like we're already too late. I don't think we need to do something when we come out of it, because we don't even know when this is going to end. I think we need to start acting now. I feel like this is the time that and I don't know how much power I have alone, but I know with this panel and everybody listening, it can be the first start. And I don't know if I could solve it, I would solve it. I think that we need to really push global brands right now. Write to your brands every day. Everybody can decide to write 10 emails to a brand every day to clean up its act and support the people in their supply chains. I feel like at the end of this, farmers will look at growing more food. And the situation for farmers, right now, the cotton farmers in the fashion industry are harvesting their rabi crop, which is harvested around March, April, May. Because of the initial few days of the lockdown, they couldn't go out to harvest. From the 21st, they were allowed to go harvest their fields. So, it is important to recognize how 80% of the food in the world comes from smallholder farmers who are a very important part of feeding us, and are going through this pandemic and working through it, and they don't have the luxury of working from home. And then there's the big component of hired labor who does not get the access that a farmer, a labeled farmer, does to earn his livelihood. What has been most inspiring is to see that Chetna Organic Growers Group, the farmer group I was talking about earlier, they've organized curfew passes and they're delivering food essentials from their own stocks to neighboring villages. The women are using waste fabric from factory floors to make masks and distribute them through the self-help groups. And I think when I hear those sporadic stories of inspiration, it really powers my drive more.
Yeah, I agree. Speaking of the other side of the spectrum altogether, the consumers. Noemi, I was wondering if you had some thoughts on consumption and how we've been hearing about how revenge consumption is going to kind of come into effect sooner than later. What are your thoughts on that kind of consumption pattern?
So I'm sorry, my connection is not very good, and I couldn't unfortunately hear what you were talking before. Do you mean in consumption now during the COVID, or more in general from the?
How do you think this lockdown and not having the ability to consume as much as the world has been used to consuming, is it going to change positively into people being more aware of what they're purchasing?
Yeah. Or so I'm very positive. Yes, I am. I'm actually something I'm thinking a lot about, and I'm very positive, and I hope that it goes the direction that we all would like to, right? But I feel like this lockdown is making people to stop a bit and to start connecting more with themselves and with what they have around them. I think we are this lockdown has gave us the opportunity to connect more with the objects we have in the house, with what we are buying. And I think as well, because of as I think Devina was mentioning before, of how some countries or some areas, they don't even have ability to create their own foods because we are exporting and importing a lot. And I think this crisis is maybe going to make business and consumers to focus more on local. Like, for example, I was doing that before the COVID, but I'm trying to consume only local foods as much as I can, or at least European. I'm Spanish and I love to eat my Spanish food. I have a very nice vegetable place who are importing things from Spain, but I'm still trying to buy from local farmers. I go to the local market every week, and I think now with this COVID is actually getting this is maybe connecting more with more people of how it's important to not only obviously for the planet, but also to support your own community, right? Because now everyone is more focused on their own community and where we are living and the situation we are living. We are all in the same boat. So hopefully people are become more mindful. They're gonna start connecting more with the objects, and they're gonna try to consume more locally and thoughtfully. And that's what I'm trying to do as well with my magazine. Try to help people to actually find those brands that are more mindful and helping or influencing or trying to influence on this change of mindset, because the way we were consuming and we are consuming right now is fast fashion and not only in fashion, food in any angle is totally unsustainable, and I don't think it makes anyone happy.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that we've been reading a lot about how sustainable fashion is something that people are going to go towards after this lockdown. Dominique, did you have any thoughts on what consumers are going to feel after this lockdown? How are they going to deal with consumption?
Dominic, you're on mute.
Thank you, thank you. I definitely think people are going to better understand the root of overconsumption and the root of disposability culture, um, and really begin to deconstruct sort of this colonial or neo-colonial sort of mindset and activations that have been going on. And when I'm thinking of consumption, I'm thinking of food and fashion and wellness and all of that, because it's so interwoven and all goes back to the land. Oh, can you guys hear that? Sorry, my phone is in my ear ringing very loud. And so I think people, well, here's one thing that I do notice. I think it's extremely vital and important to make note that Black and Brown Indigenous communities, over various periods, have been very mindful in terms of their consumption, in terms of, you know, hand-me-downs, and in terms of repurposing, and in terms of shopping local. And so I think making sure that communities who are disproportionately affected by environmental and social injustices, who have had to consume in a certain way, out of necessity and out of survival and just out of cultural ethics, are going to be propelled in spaces where they have agency and stakeholdership in these conversations. I think that's going to be amplified a lot more. And so overall, I do think consumption is going to take a shift for the better, but there's still going to be some public policy and some educational portals that we're going to still have to dismantle and disrupt. Here in the States, it's just our educational systems, our marketing and propaganda. Even when we're looking at the stimulus check, a lot of what's behind the stimulus check that we're receiving is to go back to the consumer economy, instead of how can we, if we don't have to use this money for survival, can we use this money to save and create localized economy, or create adjacent systems. So I think there's going to be a shift, but it doesn't mean that we have to be lax. There's still so much more at various high-low levels that we have to do to uncondition the consumption models, to uncondition trade laws, to uncondition just all of these different mindsets that's rooted in Americanism. So yeah, I'm very optimistic. I'm like half optimistic, half realist. And so making sure that we're continuing to amplify communities who are doing great, as well as I wouldn't say calling out, but making sure that we understand sort of the root of systems, so that people are reprogrammed differently, so that they're educated differently in how they consume and really why they consume, because a lot of consumption for a lot of communities is linked to trauma, and there's a lot of nuances around that as well. So I think things are going to shift for the better, because we're definitely forced to be more mindful in this state that we're in. But it's continuing that. That's going to be the interesting part for sure.
Yeah, and I think the mindset change in general is something that needs to happen, and that's something we also talk about a lot, is being more aware and conscious in your life. Is there something, Noemi, you had an interesting story of how you made that switch from, you weren't always like this, but you were in this fast-paced world that you were working in, and then you suddenly made this switch and realized that this is how you want to live your life. Can you tell us a little bit about that story as well?
So yeah, actually, before creating Keisei, I was working for a digital company as well, on the sports industry, where I was traveling the world because I was developing the business in other countries like Latin America or Spain. And I never liked the industry, and I took the job because it was, it was a good opportunity for me. I thought having like an international role, I could have learned about a lot about that, and the paycheck was also good. So, and then that's actually this job made me realize that I wanted to pause and I wanted to have a mindful life and do something that it has purpose for me and is actually helping others, because I was taking planes and I was like in Colombia and in Peru and then suddenly in London again, like if it's that normal, and then and just to go to meetings, and I started to realize like how bad that was for the planet, of course, but how bad it was for me as well, healthy wise. I was not feeling that happy or that fulfilled with that job and with that piece of life where I was from here to Spain to Latin America, like this, and I think so many people have this.
Oops, I think we lost her there. Noemi, can you hear us? Okay, I think we'll come back to her. Dominique, has this always been the way you had lived your life? Is it something that you had to, consciously come to terms with and realize that you want to make this shift in your lifestyle, or have you always been this kind of a person?
There was definitely an evolution for sure. As a kid, I loved the outdoors. I loved, recreational backpacking. I loved thrifting. I loved vintage shopping. I loved community engagement. Oh, did you want to?
No.
I'm so sorry. I don't know what's going on with my connection. Everyone is fine. And the only one with the problem is just coming in and down. I don't know where I was talking alone. I didn't even realize that it was cut. So I don't know where I stay, but you can continue, Dominique. Maybe later I can come back to my story.
Yeah.
Okay. So growing up, I was always into the outdoors. I loved nature. I loved vintage. I loved thrift. I loved just the energy of culture. And I even went as far as like getting my formal education, and I have a BA in business environmental management and a master's in sustainable entrepreneurship and fashion. But I think although I've always been, I guess, environmentally minded, when I moved to New York is when I had sort of this shift in consciousness in terms of who was being represented and how. And so that's when I sort of went on to this journey to really understand systems theory and understand, Afro-Indigenous concepts of sustainability, and really dig into the relationship of race relations with regards to sustainability and how it's being marketed and taught, and how solutions are being oriented, sustainable solutions are being oriented to communities who are the most impacted by environmental and social detriments. It's always been like, I've always been an eco chick. I've always been a green outdoorsy chick, but I started to shift into more of a socio-political role as I started to understand sort of how things were working and how they were affecting various communities. So I'm grateful for that. Always knew I was going to be in this space, just didn't know how, baby.
That's nice. Noemi, why don't you continue your story, and then we'll come back to Devina. It looks like we're already running out of time.
I don't know where I because I keep talking without even knowing that the line was cut. I think it's cut again.
You were telling us about how you were traveling a lot with work.
Yeah, so I was traveling a lot, and I started feeling like I was not really feeling happy at all, and I was feeling very disconnected from my ethics as well. because I always been very like, I never been like a super consumer. Like I always only try to buy what I needed. And obviously I used like 5-6 years ago, I used to go to Zara because I didn't even know what was behind that. Like, but I was not like a compulsive, I never been a compulsive consumer. But I think that kind of lifestyle from my previous job is the one that actually made me realize that I wanted to live a mindful life and more connected to my ethics, and to make like to work towards my purpose. It was important for me, and that's how the whole idea of creating Keisei came up as well. So I wanted to do something that was meaningful for me, that was helping others as well. And I started getting more interested about what was going on behind the fashion industry, sustainability, the food industry, and I started reading more and taking courses. And it brings me where I am right now, and I'm very happy. And I'm really enjoying this paused life and being more time, with my friends and family where I now, even if it's only digitally. But yeah, it's been really a real switch for me, especially in the last 2 years.
Yeah, I think that it is definitely a good time for all of us to kind of connect with not just ourselves, but like people around us and our family and friends. And it's given me as well a lot of insight into the type of person that I am, kind of what motivates me, what drives me, and those kind of things. Even though you know it at surface level to some extent, I think actually sitting down with it and, spending not just half an hour figuring out what your values are, but spending like a whole day figuring things out. And I think just that amount of time has given me so much more insight into the kind of person that I am. And I'm enjoying it as well, just trying to understand and learn myself. So that's been an exciting journey. We're unfortunately running out of time, but Devina, could you just quickly tell us about how you got yourself into this position? Have you been an individual that is conscious? How did you evolve into this kind of a person that you are?
I think maybe you've been a big part of my journey from the slow fashion run we did a couple of years ago to the social media campaigns to now writing policy reports. We've come a long way in trying to make a difference in the fashion industry together, because I really feel like, when I did my first screening of the True Cost movie, Nivi was there, and I think that's when she also made like a greater switch with IKKIVI driving sustainability. I think it was all of those small things. I started my career with chartered accountancy, and I didn't know I was going to end up in the sustainability space. But I think once you hear about modern slavery, human exploitation, and the real cost, human environmental cost of our everyday decisions, it just channelizes you to make a greater difference. I really loved Naomi. Before we move on to anything else, I wanted to say that there was an article on your platform which said businesses that are busting their guts to boost your immunity. And I think that maybe you put together this amazing panel, because I think I need to be friends with everybody here, because we definitely do align in what we're trying to do. So I just hope that we keep the dialogue alive, we do what we need to, and ensure we come out of this as a better world.
Definitely, and thank you so much for the feedback. I'm very glad you like it. The article.
Have the dialogue. I think it's so important. The world can go either way from this, and I hope it goes the right way, and we're more mindful of our consumption. And in Goa recently, I saw these food bags that had no brand, but it had just food and it had a price. And I would like to go into a world that consumes locally, and I wish brands just vanish at the end of this.
Yes, that's the hope. Let's see what happens. Dominique, do you have some closing words, wise words?
I just want to say, sitting with yourself is going to feel a little uncomfortable at times, because you're communicating with your inner ecosystem in a way that you probably have never had to do before. And so just encouraging everybody to take this time to really understand the challenging part, like the triggers and the trauma, as well as the beautiful parts, ways that you can add beauty to your life and to your community, because I think at the end of the day, community is going to be our biggest form of currency in the near future. And I think we have to be have that level of thinking if we want to build more sustainable economies and truly equitable systems globally.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Those who have spent an hour and 5 minutes with us, thank you for listening to everything. We're going to put this up on YouTube as well. So if it's something that you think you want to share with your friends and relatives, please do. We will notify you as soon as it's live. Thank you, Dominique. Thank you, Noemi.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and inspirational words as always.
Thank you. Be well, you guys.
Yes, you too. Very good.
Bye.
Bye.
See you.